Hello everyone, welcome to the new lecture, and in here I'll be your instructor and we are going to make a Candy Crush application using React.js, HTML and CSS. In this whole lecture or project we will be learning the basic fundamental concept of React and JavaScript, and using the both, comparing the both, we will introduce you to the recent hooks, components and etc, and many things where you will just learn how to drag and drop elements and how to control the array and etc and many things. So before getting started, we have to initialize the project, and for that we have to make sure that Node.js is already installed in your system. So to do that, I will show you inside our project lecture. Nothing to worry about that. Also, the very prerequisite for our project is that you should be familiar with HTML, CSS, JavaScript and React hooks. And the Node package manager, that is, we will be using the npm installation guide, not the yarn this time. And if you are familiar with the yarn, you can obviously go through it. The topics we will be exploring in this project is that the concept of this project is mainly based on the React use reducer hooks, use state hooks and use effect hooks, and the CSS designing and many things we are going to use. And I will be also showing you how to manage the components over there. So the managing component concept is very familiar in React basically, because without the components you cannot even do a proper styling of any kind of website. So this, as you can see, a mobile application will be just cloning the same thing inside our web application, and it will be the same, but the drag and drop event will be through our mouse, and we can give the same effect on that, that is through the candy matching. It will just get crushed and then we will just get another top level of candies. By this way we can go through it. And I would like to thank you everyone for listening this, and let's head towards our next lecture to get started with our project. So good luck. Hello everyone. So on the internet, looking to learn how to master React by building a fun project. In this case it's going to be a classic mobile application game called Candy Crush. For those who you have never heard of Candy Crush before, the game is simple. You have a grid of candies and your job is to match the candies in rows and columns of certain number of gain points. In this game of Candy Crush, we will have 6 colors of candy: red, blue, green, orange and purple and yellow, and we will aim to match either rows or columns of 3 or 4. Of course, once you master doing this, there is nothing stopping you from adding more candy colors and matching longer rows or columns with different results. If you wish, we will also learn how to make sure that we can only move our candies left, right, up or down by one, and make sure the place are moving the candy to will create a row or a column, otherwise we can't move it. Now before we getting or going it, I just want to stress that if you are finding this difficult at any point, I do have a also tutorial, or I will show you the tutorial on this video on how to build this in proper way. And as well as, so if you want to start with this and move on to this after, so totally it's up to you that how we'll take the all the easy learning process. Then the only prerequisite I ask of you before starting this video is have a basic understanding of HTML, CSS, JavaScript and React before starting. But if you are feeling adventurous, then please go ahead and trying anyway, as there really is no better way to learn than to push yourself in this kind of exercises. Okay, so a lot to learn, including how to drag and drop elements in React. I'm excited. Let's get to it. Okay, let's get to the first thing, that is, first I am just going to start off a new project with WebStorm. I am using WebStorm as my idea of choice. However, you don't have to, or you can use whatever code editor or IDE you wish. With the WebStorm we can, however, I can spin up React apps pretty fast just by using the platform. So I'm just going to ahead and do that. The project that I want to call this is going to be Candy Crush React, and I am saving in my WebStorm project directory. Now as you can see here, because I have chosen React as my boilerplate, you will see the create react app command showing up here. The create react app is a great way for us to essentially spin up an environment fast. It essentially comes pre-configured and has all the dependencies you need in order to start building a new single page React application. In React, when starting out using React, I would actually strongly suggest building the project from scratch, as you will then learn about label and webpack. And but I am going to assume everyone have here already has that knowledge and knows the fundamentals of React and simply wants to practice that they know by building a game of Candy Crush. So now that we know what creates React app, is the time to get using it. Now, as I said, I can simply select it here from a drop down after selecting React in menu right here on the left. However, if you are not using WebStorm, please use the following command in your terminal, just like so. So I am just going to do into WebStorm projects, use the command and then use whatever you want to call your directory that you are gonna store the project files. And so for example, you can do Candy Crush React and then essentially doing the same thing. Okay, I'm not gonna do that, I'm gonna use this. Now if you are using or if you're doing it using your terminal, please make sure to have node version 14 and above installed and npm version of 5.6 and above installed into your machine. So let's go ahead and create your project. And there we go. As you will see, my create react app is doing its thing and it's creating all the files necessary for my react project. If I go ahead and just show you in here, you will already see a package.json file, the public directory as source directory, the node modules, the git ignore file, the readme and the unlock file showing up as our project is installing. And there we go, all the files have now been installed. Okay, so if I go and run this, so once again, if you look in the package.json, you will see the start command. If I run npm run start, so again, if you are not using WebStorm, please go ahead and run that in the terminal npm run. So I can do that here. I am just going to open my terminal and do npm run start, making sure that I am in the directory Candy Crush React. Or if you are using WebStorm, then please just go ahead and click here npm run start, and that's now going to be spin up this app in the browser. And there we go. So that in our create react app project, it's the template. If you have a look in the source directory and on app.js, you will see the code for the spinner that we just saw. Okay, so here it's there's app logo. And if we have to look again, if I just go ahead and save some text, let's go ahead and just put Ania, you will see that changing in the browser too. But at that moment, I don't want this. I want to start from scratch. So what I'm going to do is that just return an empty div for now. So let's just make a div like so, and I'm just going to get rid of the semicolons because I don't like semicolons. We are no longer using the logo, so I'm just going to delete that. I'm also going to delete this app css file because I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to have one single css file in here, which is going to be the index css file. So let's go ahead and delete this one, and right here I'm going to delete it as we are no longer using it. And I'm also going to delete the logo as we are also no longer using it. So delete. I'm not going to be writing test. I am just going to delete this file as well. And if we look in the index.js file, I don't want to report web vital, so I'm going to get rid of that and get rid of the import. So we want to keep the app imported, we want to keep the index css file, and we want to keep these two as well. Okay, so now that we are not using web report vitals and we are not going to doing test, I am once again just going to delete these files right here. So there we go. I'm also going to delete this yarn lock as I'm not using yarn. I am just using npm for this project. And great, let's go ahead and save that. And if we look in our browser now, you will see the app is still running. However, it's just a blank page. You will see no errors in the console. Wonderful. So there we are. Here is our blank slate. And now let's get to creating our project. So I am just going to minimize this for now and make this a little bit bigger so we can see. However, okay, so we are importing the app into our index.js file, which is feeding it into our HTML. So let's go have a look at the app. So this is essentially where most of my logic and game logic will happen. So I'm just going to move this down and perhaps make it a little bigger so everyone can see, and make this a little bit smaller. The first thing that I'm going to do is decide how big I want my board. Now I want to make my board 8 int cross 8, so I'm going to use a const of width to do this and just assign the value 8 to the constant and width, so we can reuse it in our code. The other thing that we know is that we are going to have candy colors, so I'm going to spend it like that, the American way. And I'm going to make an array of all the candy colors, so I know that we are going to have a blue candy, also a green, orange, purple, a red candy, and a yellow candy, so there we go. There are my candy colors. That is my width. These are two constant that we need for. Okay, so now it's time to start creating our board, and I'm going to create our board using an array. So the first thing I need to do is figure out how many squares make up my board, because the width, because the width is going to be 8 and the height is also going to be 8. That's 64 squares that I need to make up my board. And to make up those squares, I'm going to use colors, so I need 64 random colors in any array. Okay, let's go ahead and create that array first. I'm creating an array of 64 items, and each of those items is going to be one of these colors. So let's go ahead and do that with the function. Before we start, I'm actually going to use functional expression for this. So I'm going to write const tab like so that, so that that's a functional expression. It's exactly the same as function that we had written there before, but it's just a preference, so that is why what I'm going to using. And let's go ahead and write our first function. So const create board, just like so. Once again, to reiterate, if this is the first time you are seeing this, this is the same as me writing or creating board like so. So function expression, and this is a function. So I'm just going to delete that, and let's carry on. So to create in my array of 64 items, or to be precise 64 randomly selected colors, I'm going to create a for loop. So I am going to use for let I equals 0. Thanks for top 9, as I is similar, then well 64, because that's how many items are in my array. Or I could use with multiply by width, because as we know width is 8 and 8 multiplies by 8 is 64. And I'm going to increment I by 1. So okay, great. So each time I am incrementing, well, I am going to get a random color first. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's call this const rand color like so. And my random color, well, I'm going to go into this candy colors array. So let's grab that, and I'm going to essentially pass through a random number. Okay, so I'm going to pass through either a 0, 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4, or a 5 to get back one of this, and I could do so by essentially, well, I'm going to get the candy colors length, and if I actually use match random on this, so we're going to math random, and I'm just going to wrap this up in month floor, math floor, just to make sure that the numbers are full numbers, so integers. Okay, so that will round it down, so if it's 5.5, it will round to 5 because of the quotes that is not 5.5 index number in here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Essentially this is just spitting out a random number from 0 to 5, and we are putting it into the candy cars array with this syntax. So if it makes it easier for you to read, I can also go const random number from 0 to 5 and take all of this out. Okay, so that's how we get the random number and pass it through into here. Okay, so it's up to you. I'm going to keep it the way I did it here. So okay, so to get random color, I'm essentially just passing through a number from 0 to 5 into the candy colors array, and that will return either blue, green, orange, purple and yellow. So hopefully that makes sense, that is we get how random color. And what I'm gonna do is each time we get a random color, well, I'm actually going to create an array. So let's call this random color arrangement, and this is going to be an empty array. Okay, for now, and empty array for now, and you put it above loop, because each time we loop we are going to get random color arrangement, and we are going to use the JavaScript method of push to push the random color inside our random color arrangement. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. However, let's see what happens to all right arrangement. Arrangement just making sure that spelled correctly. Okay, random color arrangement. So now if I call this function, actually let's console.log. So if we can console outside of the loop, what's going to happen if I console log the random color arrangement here. Okay, because if I console it here, would literally print out each time. I am going to do it here. So and if I now call create board, so this is how we call the function, and just open up in here, you will see an array of randomly arranged colors. Okay, and 64 of them. So if I refresh this, it will be different each time. Wonderful. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's carry on. So I don't need to console this anymore. What I do need is to do, however, is the save this to state. So I'm going to use the use state hook to do this. So all I'm going to do is go like this, hopefully. So all I'm going to do is go like this, hopefully. You know the syntax of use state. So here is my array, and I'm going to say the color current color arrangement. So all I'm going to do this is go like this, hopefully. You know the syntax of use state. So here I am my array, and I'm going to say the color current color arrangement is going to be here, and I'm going to use set current color arrangement to set this value. Okay, a new state to start off is going to be an empty array, and I'm going to also have to import. So let's go ahead and do that up here. I'm just going to use import use state from React, because that is a dependency that has been installed for us. As and as you will see here, we don't need to install it, so I am importing use state from React. Now I am going to use set current color arrangement, and instead of console logging outside of the loop, I am going to set the current color arrangement after this loop has stopped running. So I am going to get the random color arrangement array. So once again, after the loop has stopped running, this should be full of 64 times items, and I am going to set our current color arrangement using set current color arrangement. Okay, so now if I console log this and took in the browser. Oh, there we go. And that is going to keep repeating, but there we go. You can see 64 items are showing up. Okay. So once again, I am using set current color arrangement to set this value. And right here, if we start off, we use state will be an empty array, and we are using set color current arrangement to change that by passing arrangement through the value here to make this value the same. So hopefully that makes sense. If you haven't used sets before, please do watch a more in-depth tutorial on it. So let's carry on. What we need to next do is stop this from essentially re-rendering, because this will happen. So what I am going to do is put this in a use effect. So all I am going to do is call this. So I am going to get the use effect right here, just like so. I am going to whack the create board function in it, and I only want this to run once. I am going to put an empty array where without any dependencies. So we also need to import use effect. If your code editor hasn't done that before, now if we refresh this, we will see the function only gets called. So once again, if you don't know much about use effect, please go ahead and pause here. However, uh, in a nutshell, use effect essentially lets you perform side effects and function in component. So we are in the function component. I am performing a use effect inside of it. Okay, in this particular example, what I am doing is using use effects to tell React that our component needs to do something after the render. So it's render, and after it's render, I want to essentially call the function. Okay, and we are only calling it once, and I said if we had dependencies in here, so if we had dependencies in here like so for example, if I had a variable in here, so for example, going to make up a variable because we don't really have one, and we can use at the moment. So anytime that the variable will change, then this should re-render. Okay, that's what we can do here. So for example, if the width was to be changing during the project, then this will get called each time. But as I said, I only want this to be called once, so I am going to leave an empty array. Okay, great. So now that we have done that, let's carry on. And so we have created a random array. The next thing that I want to do is use this random array to create a board for us visually. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to go down and here, and in the return we will, well, let's start creating some visual components. So let's go ahead and just name this app like so and save. I'm just going to get up my CSS file. For a moment, I am going to just going to put it right next to us here. Just get rid of that, and what I am going to do is rid of this all this styling here, and let's style up the div that has the class name of app. So what I am going to do in here is just simply display flex and give the whole app a padding of 30 pixel just to space it out. And the next thing in here is, well, I am going to create another div, and I am going to give this div the class name of okay. And once again, let's grab the class of game. What I'm going to do is decide this is my game board, and I am going to set that the game board's width is going to be 560 pixel, and the height is also going to be 560 pixel. Okay, and what I'm going to do is usually use display flex and flex wrap, and I have chosen the width 560 pixel, as I know that this number is nicely divisible by 8, which is our width, and the number for the height. So for example, if I then want to say that any image, so here is an image, but any image that is in the div with the class of game, so that so that is how we would that any image that will be in the div with a class of game, or any element for the matter with a class of game. I want to make sure that its width is and height of 560, so that it's 70 pixel, and also a height of 70 pixel, like so. So there we go. So now if we start mapping to create divs, so what I am going to do is get the current color arrangement. Just make this a little bit smaller and use the JavaScript method of map to map out each candy color that exists in the array. So we can call this whatever we wish. I have chosen to call it candy color. For the readability, I am also going to get it index, and then I am going to create an image for every single item in the current color. Arrangement array, in the current color arrangement array, so just like so, here is my image. I am going to open it up, and then I am going to give this key of whatever the index is, but I am also going to give it a background color, making sure not to miss that right here. Okay, so now WebStorm is actually giving me some prompts. Let me know this is a number, this is not code, this is a prompt from web store, and I am just going to do style for now, ground color, background color, and whatever the candy color is. Okay, so I'm just doing this for now. Essentially we will be replacing this with the image, but for now I'm just I want to show you that this is working. So I am literally going to changing the background color of the image element. Okay, so once again I am getting the current color arrangement array. So all 64 items I have called each item candy color, and for each item I am also saying I want the index of it, and then I am mapping that onto image element. So for example, if this candy color has the red, I am then assigning it to the background color of this image element. Great, and then make sure that it's a closing tag, like so. We seem to have missed a parenthesis, and there is we go. So now if we look in here, we have 64 images, each with random colors. So if we refresh that, that will change, and the reason this array is being arranged in this way is because we use display flex on the game itself. So if I used to get rid of this, so for example, let's comment out flex wrap and flex display, that will change. Okay, great, that is looking good. I don't think I will be needing this css file for now, so I'm just going to get rid of this like css, and let's carry on. And of course, like with an image, we need to make this more accessible. So what I'm going to do is an alternative text to image. I'm going to put a candy color, just like so, that I am it's more readable. Okay, so to recap, we have used a function called create broad, and to essentially create an array of 64 items, and using this array right here, then we have essentially mapped that over, and then we have used the JavaScript method of map to map the result of array onto images. Okay, and we have to use CSS styling in order to make it visually appear like a grid on our browser. Wonderful. So that is looking good. Let's now start to check for columns of 4 columns of 3 rows, or 4 and rows of 3. So I'm going to do this with more functions. So right above the create wood function, let's write another function this time to check for column of 3. So there are we go here is our function. Let's carry on. Once again, I'm going to have to loop in order to do this. So I'm going to loop over all my squares and all 64 of them. However, so let I equals to 0, and this I this time will, let's have a thing. If we have a it's gonna comment this out for now. If we are checking for columns of 3, well, a column of 3 would start with I. Here is, you would loop down to check the one below, and the one below that goes. So we are essentially going to add a width. So if we add a number 0 here, this would be a number 8 here, and this would be number 16 here. So we are going by indexes, and we would do that for this this column, this column, this column, this column, all the way this column. So this column, and also this one to this column right here. So we want to stop checking at this square, and this square has the index 47. Okay, so if you don't believe me, please have a go to at counting going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But essentially this has the index of 47. So we need to stop looping at this one right here. So I'm just going to uncomment this out and say that we are on a loop tool index 47 and increment by 1. So there we go. So we are going to loop over all our squares up to the square index is 47, and let's now decide how we are going to define our column of 3. So let's call it const column of 3 like so, and then we are going to say that we want to start our column from I, and as we said, we then want to get I plus the width, and then I plus width times 2. So once again imagine we are here, so square index 0, we are looping our first index is 0, and then we are defining the column by indexes. So we want to check square with index 0, but also square with index 7, 8, and also square with index 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so essentially 0. 0 plus width is 8, and 0 plus width times 2 is 16. So we have defined our column, and of course as we loop over one of this one, this will be 9, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. If it is doesn't, please have a got a console logging this out, and it loops over to get a better understanding. Great. So we have defined what a column of 3 is. Next thing that we need to do is choose the decided color that we are going to check. So I'm gonna go const decided color like so, and well, essentially that is going to be, I'm going to go into the current color arrangement and then just grab the first item. Okay, so once again we are looping if, and if we are starting out here, so 0, that we know that the value of this is purple. So we are grabbing purple, and we are assigning the value of purple to decided color. So that is the color that we are going to check in our column of 3. Great. So if this time we are going to get a column of 3, okay, and if every square in our column of 3 has, so we are going to get the column current color arrangement, and I'm going to pass through that square, and if it equals the decided color, we know that all 3 squares in our column of 3 are a match. Okay, there a column of 3, making sure to have enough parentheses there once, and let's talk this through. We have got our column of 3, we have decided the numbers from our array which make up of a column of 3. So once again this could be 0, 8, 16, and if each of this item, if each of this the item keys, okay, if 0, 8, 16, so we have to call this a square. You could call this number if each number, and you pass it into the current color arrangement. So once again if you pass it into the long array, and it's 0, which is purple, and 8, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, well, that's a green, and 16. Well, we already know this isn't a match, but 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, so that's a green. So the previous column would not be a match, same for this one. So square 0 is red, square number 8 is orange, and square number 16 is green. Okay, so that's exactly what this line of code is doing here. We are checking if each of this is essentially the same at first. Square, okay, so some of them are the same as red, so we are carrying on. But if this was true, however, well, what would I want to do? I would essentially want to get the column of 3 again, and for each item or for each square inside that column of 3, perhaps we don't want to call it square. It's up to you. You could say number for each square that in that column of 3, well, and I again will need to pass that through into my current color arrangement. I am going to pass it through the square, or essentially the picked color, and all I am going to do is say that I want it blank. So blank, let's go ahead and say that blank is just emptied like so. Great. So this means that all of this right here, if they are a match, well, just be replaced with an empty string. So let's go ahead and try that out again, and I will need to call this function. So let's go ahead and call it. However, I do want to call it in another use effect. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do this below this use effect. I'm doing it in a separate use effect because I want to trigger this when certain variables change. So I'm going to put it in some dependencies into it. So I'm going to put use effect like so. I'm going to whack and check column and of 3, column of 3, and call it in here. However, I did say that I want this to trigger each time something changes. So actually I'm just going to put in the check for column of 3 function as a dependency in here, and I actually want this to check for column of 3 every 100 millisecond. Okay, because the board will change around a lot, and I essentially want to create a timer here that will essentially check my board every 100 millisecond. As long as we have the browser up, this will essentially run. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use the JavaScript method of set interval and pass through a callback. So just like so, and then let's save an id for this. So my id is going to be called timer. So we can clear the id using this, we can clear the interval using timer. So there is my set interval, and I want this to trigger every 100 millisecond, and I'm actually going to check the column of 3 in here. So I am going to check it in every 100 millisecond. Okay, and each time this runs, we will going to them restart, and this, so I am going to clear the interval using the timer. So hopefully that makes sense here, and there we go. So essentially, to recap this code, schedules a new interval to run every 100 millisecond inside of the use effect. Okay, so this will schedule once the React component result for the first time, and to properly clear the interval, we will return clear interval from the use effect hook, passing in the essentially the const timer. Okay, so there we are checking for the column of 3, and if there is 3, we are going to change the current color arrangement to be a blank. But then of course we need to reset this colored color arrangement. Okay, so it's the set state with a new current color arrangement. So I'm just going to get this and then pass through. So once again I am getting the array, and I am going to replace the current color arrangement like so. To so in case you haven't come across the 3 dots before, this is the spread syntax. If it is a new addition to the set of operators in JavaScript, ES6, and essentially it takes an array and expands it into individual elements. Okay, so that is what is happening here, and I am taking the array, I am splitting it out and putting it back into the array. And now I am also going to add this as a dependency to my use effect right here. So there we go, wonderful. So now great, so if we have a look in here, you will see that is working. If I refresh, any column of 3 will now be replaced with an empty string. So as you will see here, here is an empty string, here is an empty string, and here is an empty string, and that represent the place on our board thanks to this array. Okay, so wonderful, and this check will carry on happening every 100 millisecond thanks to what we have written here in the use effect. Okay, so this is looking good, and now let's use this to check for columns of code. So it's going to be exactly the same. I am just going to simply paste check for column of 4. However, I am going to start this as a bunch higher. We are going to start checking for column of 4 at the number 39, just like so. And this time we also need to define our column of 4, and all I am going to do is use I plus width multiplied by 3 this time, but we can keep the decided color at first square. And if column of 4 this time, so let's get the column of 4, and if every square in it is the same as the decided color, well, then change that item to just an empty string like so. Wonderful. And then once again let's grab this, and I'm going to put this in my use effect. So please check for that. I am just going to put it in as a dependency here. Now I am just going to move this check for column of 4 to above the check for column of 3, because I want to check for 4 to happen before the column of 3. Okay, because it clears the 3, and that could have potentially been a 4. So let's go ahead and do that up here as well. I am just going to move that up, and then just for readability I am going to move that around in the dependency as well. So now if we have a refresh, you will see a column of 4 being eliminated. Okay, so this is looking great. Now let's carry on. So we have got our checks for the column. Next let's check for some rows. So let's start off with 3 again. I am just gonna copy this, I am gonna put this down here, and I am gonna check for row of 3. This time I am gonna define our row of 3. So this should be a bunch easier. This is simply going to be I with I plus 1 and then I plus 2. So that is now my row of 3. We are going to check all 64 squares this time. However, I am done with this because let's just comment this out, because instead of stopping here and not checking this too well, we actually don't want to check any of this either. Okay, so there are bunch of eyes that we want to miss, and essentially it's all of this because we're starting here, we are doing a check for now 3. We are starting here, we are doing a check for row and of 3, check for row of 3 for yellows. We are starting here with doing a check for row of 3 of whatever color that is, and so on so on. Let's eliminate this from the check. I am going to show you how to do that. So I am just going to just 1 second uncomment this out and check for a row if 3 loop over or 64. The decided color is the first square that we come across, and then we also have not valid, so constant. So constant not valid or const not valid equals, I am going to open up my array, and then not valids are index 6, 7, but then also 14, 15, 22, 23, 30, 31, 38, 39, 46, 47, 54, 55, 63 and 64. Okay, so those are all not valids, and I'm going to use not valid. So if not valid includes I, so the index we are looping all over well, then we just continue. Okay, so if we are looping over and the index happens to be 6, well, that's not valid, so we just continue. Okay, so we don't check that square. However, if it's fine, it's not the not valid array, well, then we want to get our row of 3, and for each square in our row of 3, if we put the square, so if you put, for example, 0 into the current color arrangement and then come back with the same color, that is the decline or decided color, then we want to get our row of 3, and once again we just want to make them blank. So there we go, that's it for the check row of 3. So I'm going to copy that and once again put it here. I'm going to check the row of 3 down and I'm going to put it as a dependency, and finally check for row of 4. So once again I'm gonna put that up here, check for row of 4, define our row of 4. So all we have to do is just add I plus 3 like so, and I will be reformatting this all a bit later, so don't worry too much for now. Now we have to decided the color, well, decided color, well, we have already decided that, and then replace this to check for every square in our row of 4 to check if it is the same as decided color. And however, we need to increase our not valid array. Okay, so if we look here, not valid would be of all of this, but now also of this. So let's go ahead and add those numbers. 2 are not valid, so I'm just gonna add a 5 now, and then also 13, and then also 21, and also 29, 37, 45, and then 53 and 62. Okay, so that is now looking a lot better. And now once again let's just add this down here, making sure it's above the checks of 3, just like so. So now if we have a look here, we now clearing everything that is a column of 3 or a column of 4 or a row of 3 or a row of 4. Wonderful, so this is looking great. Let's carry on. Now we have now completed doing checks for all the matches. The next thing we are going to do is actually move down here squares into the squares below if it is empty. Okay, and then 53 and 62. Okay, so that is now looking a lot better. And now once again let's just add this down here, making sure it's above the checks of 3, just like so. So now if we have a look here, we now clearing everything that is a column of 3 or a column of 4 or a row of 3 or a row of 4. Wonderful, so this is looking great. Let's carry on. Now we have now completed doing checks for all the matches. The next thing we are going to do is actually move down here squares into the squares below if it is empty. Okay, so this is the next step. This is what we are going to tackle. Now let's do it. So for this I am actually going to write another function, so right before the create board, but after we all do the checks, let's actually get to writing a function to move our squares down. So I'm going to call this const move into square. Below just like so. Okay, and once again let's write for a loop. So for let I equals 0, and as long as I is smaller than 64 minus the width I I think this should be okay, because we only want to check all the squares up here. We're going to check if the one below it is free to go into the, so we went to stop looping around about here, and then let's webstorm again. So I am going to uncover this out, and then we want to increment I by 1. Okay, so if the current color arrangement, and if I show whatever, we are looping over plus and the width, so we are going to look for the square in directly below it, and if that equals nothing. Okay, so maybe I'm just going to make this more readable. If the square below the square R we are looping equals nothing, well then we want to get the color current arrangement I plus width and actually change it to the color current color arrangement item. Okay, so if the one below the one that we are looping is blank, we are essentially going to get the one we are looping and move it down. So if it is blank and then we are red, then it's going to turn it into red. Okay, and then that means that the one above us now, so that are it's blank. Okay, so there we go. So that should move them all down over here. So let's have a look. This I'm just going to oops, make sure that this is not there. It needs to look like this. Then we go once again, put it into my use effect. I'm just going to put it down here and call it like so, and put it on here as a dependency. You will see that any blank ones up here, so maybe we should slow that down. Essentially everything that was blank below here is moving to the top. Okay, so the top ones are blank, everything is falling. So I can now shoot this down for you to have a look if you wish. Let's change. So once again there was a blank free space here, and it's being replaced. It's as if all others falling down into the space. Let's have a look again now one, and then you will be slowly and slowly the colors replacing the blank ones and the blank ones moving up. Wonderful. So now we are left with some blank ones up here. So essentially that problem is that if we are in the first row, we don't have anything to move down. Okay. So we need to generate some new candies. If the first row is empty, so I'm going to show you how to do that now. So let's go ahead and move here. So let's define our first row again. So const first row equals, and then I'm going to define it as 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Okay, so that makes up our first row. Those are the indexes that make up first row, and if first row includes I, so whatever index we are looking over, that means we are in the first row. So I'm going to say this as const is first row, and if we are in the first row, see if it is first row, if this is true and the current color arrangement I equals an empty array. So if we are in the first row and the number we are looping over is a blank well, then we need to generate a random color. Once again I am going to get my candy color length, and I'm going to multiply this by math random, and I'm also going to pass this through math float to make sure that we have a full integer, so just like we decided before. So great, and I'm going to say this is let random color, and I'm just going to grab the color arrangement and whatever index we are in. So we are looping over the array, and then I am going to replace whatever values in there at that index with the random color. So this is actually a random number, we should say so number, and then let's get the candy colors and pass through the random number. Okay, so there we go. So now if we have a look here one, so everything's moving up, but new candies are generating. Everything should be full when this stops running. Great, wonderful. So now let's actually put this back to the speed that is it was going at the same. I am going to put this to make it look more realistic in terms of Candy Crush. Okay, so there we go. The whole board is essentially replenishing itself. Great. Okay, so now that we have that it's time to learn how to start dragging and dropping candies. So we can move around and our board in order to get matches. So let's do that next. So to do so, this I'm actually going to do back to my image right here, and I'm actually going to give each of these data ID, so it's actually easier for us to work with. I'm actually going to show the data ID of the square that we need. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to assign the data ID as the index. I'm also going to make each of the image draggable. So just pass through, and on drag over, I'm just going to use E. Prevent default. Okay, because we are not going to use drag over, but we still need it here. So I'm going to copy that because I'm going to reusing it and then also have a drag on enter. And once again, I'm just going to do the same and on drag leave. Okay, so once again, I'm doing this because we are not going to be doing this. I want to prevent its default action, and finally we need to drop. So we are going to have function for this, and then we also want a drag and so on. Drag, and we are also going to have a function for this, and we also want on drag start, which again will have a function for this. So let's go ahead and write this now. For this function, I am in going to call the function drag start. Let's call this drag drop, and let's call this drag end. Okay, great, and let's start writing this function above here. So I'm going to do this right above where we create the board const drag start. For now, I'm just going to write a console log to show what is happening. So this is drag start. Let's also have drop drag drop and drag end. Making sure it's filled exactly the same as we did below. So drag dot, so we have this three. Now I mean that because we wrote these properties on the images themselves, I can now drag them, and if we look at the console log, I am actually going to stop this from printing. So let's go ahead and remove the console log that does that. There we go. So now if we drag this, we can see the drag has started, and then if we drop it, say on the red, on you will see drag drop and drag and initialize. The difference between drag drop and drag end is that when we drop it, okay, so when we literally let go, that it is a drag drop and drag end. It what happens after we let the go. Okay, so there is a different, it's very small, but it makes a huge difference in what we are actually about to do. So after we let the go, okay, so there is a difference. It's very small, but it makes huge difference in what we are about to do. So let's get to it. So now once again, let's go back this, and what I'm going to do is use a drag start to pick out the id of square that we are dragging. So I can do so easily. I'm going to pass through a for event, and if I console log e, so now if I pick one up, you will see drag start. You will also use information that comes with the square. I am dragging this is because we added the data id, so we now know that this has the index 31. We have draggable true, and then we have the background color blue. So this is essentially everything that we mapped onto here. Okay, so that's essentially I am also going to do so for this right here. So we just, so we can see everything as we drag and drop and drag. So there we go. This is looking good. This is also going good. Time to check that we have the right IDs for looking over. So for example, when we did the columns where we wanted to stop for the column of 3, we want to stop looping at this one, which is id 47, but it's actually less than 47. So we can either do equal 37, maybe let's do that, column of 3, so it's smaller than equals to 47, and column of 4. Once again, let's just check that 1, so this could be where we stop looping, and this is 39. So once again, let's make this smaller than or equal to 39, and for rest of this should be fine, because with the checks of rows are literally checking all of them. Okay, great. And then perhaps we also want to just more precise with this number. To move into square below, well, we would have to stop in this id 55. We would stop as id 55. So let's go ahead and put id 55, but it can also be 55. Okay, great. So that is much more precise now. And now once again we are going to drag, and we are drag, when we drag a square, so on drag start we get the data, we will get all of the information. I actually want to save this whole element to state. Okay, I want to save all of this so that I can do so using your state. So let's go ahead and write it up here. I'm going to say square being dragged, so we have which square is being dragged, and all at all times I am going to use state, and this is going to be not to start with. So now I am going to use set square being dragged to set my square being dragged. So once again I am going to down here to set square being dragged and pass through the target, so the whole image element with all of this information. So great. So that is the square being dragged, and then, well, we are dragging a square that is being so set to the square being dragged. And if I want to drop it here, well, I actually want to get that information on the green square, because that is square that's being replaced. The green square is the only being replaced, so I can do so as well. So once I'm actually going to copy this square being dragged, square being replaced, replace square b, place set swimming in the place. I am going to use this to set that. So once again down here, and this time on drag drop I am going to set in target. Okay, so that is currently setting the square being dragged and setting the square being replaced on drop, and on drag in is where I want all the logic to happen. So see if this is a valid move or not. So this is going to be a lot of code, but just bear with me. So I'm just going to get rid of this for now. I'm just going to get rid of this one actually. So in drag and well, what to do I want to happen will, I want to get the id of the square being replaced. So square being replaced, and I want to get the attribute of data id. Okay, and let's save this as constant square or const square being replaced by d. So now we have the id of this, probably need to be put in past int to make sure this is the number, not a string, because this will come back, and save it as a number so that we can addition and math to it. We are saving the id of the square being replaced Next, I also need to get the ID of the square being dragged. So I'm just going to copy this. Maybe let's put it up here. Square being dragged ID. Square being dragged. Okay. So let's see if this works. Console log square being dragged ID. Console log square being replaced ID. So I'm just going to drag this one and drop it here. There. So indeed this is ID 47, and that's what I am dragging, and the square being replaced in the one with ID 55. If you don't believe me, we can expect this 55. This should be 47 and it's 47. So that it is working. Let's carry on. So now I want to switch out colors, right? So I can do this easily. So I can get my current color arrangement. I'm going to pass through a number into it, and that number is actually going to be the square being replaced ID. Okay, so whatever square is being replaced, well, I want to get it, I want to find it in my current color arrangement, and I want to change the color in that array to be color that I am dragging, and I can do so by getting the square being dragged and not getting its ID, by this time getting the color. So I can do so by getting background color. Style background color. Okay, so that's how you would do it. I'm going to do the same for other one. So I'm going to get the square being dragged ID and change it to the square being replaced. So now if I do this, the color switch around. Okay, how cool is that? However, we can switch them with any color on this board. We don't want that, we only want to switch it if there is a possibility of it being a row or a column match only if it's moved by one. So let's go ahead and do that next, and I am going to do this, just make some valid moves. So let's check if valid moves is either one up, one down, or right. So there are my valid moves. I am going to define my valid moves as the square being dragged id minus 1, square being dragged id minus width. So the one above, so this is why I wanted this to be number, would not be able to do this if it was strings. Square being dragged plus one of one, and square being dragged id plus width. So checking the one below, so these are my valid moves, and let's check if it's valid. Move, so let's define with the valid move, and valid move essentially valid move, so the array if it includes square being replaced id. So here my array, and this is essentially a bunch of numbers. Now okay, this is a bunch of numbers. If that these numbers include the id of the square being replaced, then it's a valid move. Okay, so that's a good way of checking if we can go in the index. So we are yellow here, say we are index 38 and this is index 30. So 30, so this is a valid move because 38 minus the width is 8 and is 30. So with the id of square being dragged as 30, then it is included in valid moves array and its valid move. Great. We have done with, however, we also need to check if the space we are going to is a row of 3 and as a row of 4 columns, 3 of 4 column. So to do so, the what I am actually going to do is going to check up, and if it is a column of 3, I am also going to return boolean of true. So if I call function all of this, will happen, but will also return a boolean of true. I am going to do this for all of them, so I am going to do it in one of here. So if it is a match, I am going to return true, and I am also going to return true. So there we go. Now in here I can actually get all my functions. So if I get the function check for column of 4, check for column of 3, check for row of 4, check for column of 3, and if it's true we will return a boolean of true. So I can save this something. So whatever return is going to save as of row of 3. So of course this will true, this will be true, and then do the same for all others. So const oops, this should be a column of 4 and a column of 4. Const and const is a row of 4. Const is a column of 3. Const is a column should be is a row of 3. Check for row of 3, so that column of 4, row of 4, column 3, row of 3. Okay, we are saving whatever the boolean returns as. And now if the square being replaced id exists, okay, so we are have already have got one being replaced. Essentially we have moved into drop it, and its valid move and is either a row, is a row of 3, or is a row of 4. Or is a column of 4, or is a column of 3. Okay, so that's a long one right here. Perhaps just move this down. So if all that is true, well, then great, everything is fine. We can drop it. Let square being dragged to null. So we can start again and set square being replaced. Now we can start again. Great. Otherwise, so else we will essentially just want to move everything back. So I'm going to go back into my color arrangement and get the square being replaced id and change it back to the square being replaced. Style background color. Okay, so I'm just changing it back. The change happened. I am changing it back. Perhaps you could do the way I decided to make it. Then I also want to the same for others. So I'm just going to copy this square being dragged id, square being dragged style color. Cool. And then once it is done, we also need to set the current color arrangement, and once again is just it to this new current color arrangement. Great. So that's what that was long, but hopefully makes sense to you. Let's try it out. Now let's go ahead and try and move it here. I am going to try to move this one. It won't move because it's not a column of 3. It does not make a column of 3 or column of 4. So let's try another. If the move that will make of 3, and great, it disappeared, and then the game carries on, and this is looking really good. I'm really pleased with that, what we have made so far. Great. I'm really happy with this. So next thing, this is looking good. The game logic is working. The next thing I am going to do is show you how to replace this with little images instead of squares. So let's go ahead and do that now. So first thing I'm going to do is actually import some images in here. So I'm going to do this by going in here and on the same level as my app. So still I am in my source directory. I'm going to make a new directory and call this images. and in here I'm just going to drag some images. So I already have some. I'm just going to drag them in like so and just add all of them. Okay, so we go. We are many images, and I'm going to import them so I can use them inside the file. So this might take a while. I'm going to import blue candy. I'm choosing to call it blue candy, and I'm going to into my images directory. So I'm going in here. I'm getting the blue candy just like so. I'm importing that from our use. I'm also going to do the same for all 6 candies. So there we go. I'm also going to actually import a blank. So we don't have a blank on one, however I will make one now. So blank, so I'm going to call that file. Then when let's call this true, green candy, this is the green candy. So this is going to be green, this is going to be orange candy, so let's call this orange. So this is going to be the purple candy. So I'm going to change this to purple, and that is what it's called. And here it is going to be the red candy, so let's change to red. I'm going to rename this yellow candy, so I'm going to do edit this just so it's the line everything else, and call this yellow candy so we can use this in our file. Okay, so there we go. Now I'm just going to replace this here. So in this one with, so instead of having words, I'm literally replacing this with images we just imported. Again, this should be probably small, doesn't need to be capital. Much candy, purple candy, red candy, yellow candy, and black. Okay, so once again, orange candy, purple candy, red candy, yellow candy. I feel like we are missing one green candy. Great. So now that we have that, I am just going to get the blank image as well, and let's carry on. So now I am actually going to replace all the blank space. So the empty string with the blank images. So there is one, there is another, there is another, and there is another. And it's quite a few in here. I'm so just going to make sure I get all of them. Okay, so that is looking good, and we also need to start replacing this. So I am going to get rid of that, and instead I'm going to just have the source of the image as the path to my image here. So let's go ahead and put that inside candy color. Okay, and what else we do talk about colors? Well, here, so it's going to be the source. This time we are going to get rid of that and use get attribute and pass through the source. This time we, so that you how, so this time we are going to get rid of that and use get attribute and pass through the source. This is time to show that how we'll get the source. We don't have the background color anymore, we are using images instead. So let's have a look at that. And wonderful, and just check that everything is working, and indeed it is great. So this is looking good, and next thing I want to do is just add a scoreboard. So let's go ahead and do that next. To so to do this, I am actually going to create a new component. So of course, please feel free to refactor this. I will be refactoring this probably because I put it online for you, or you can just get it in the notes lecture. And for now I'm just going to leave it as it is and create a new directory called component. And in here I'm actually going to create a component called a scoreboard. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to add that, and let's define our scoreboard. So const scoreboard, I'm just going to create a component. And don't forget, if we want to use it in app.js, we need to export it. So export default scoreboard. That is the basic React syntax. I am essentially really showing you this to show you how to work with components. If you want to refactor, because if you want to add more styling, which I definitely recommend to you, this would be a good approach. You could perhaps make the images as a component, so that once you loop over there, you can also have the game mode as a component. It's completely up to you. So our scoreboard is going to be super simple. Like I said, this is not about styling. I don't want this to be about styling. I want it to be about learning React and practicing your JavaScript and React skills. So I'm going to give this class name of scoreboard. That's like, so thank you very much for that prompt. So here as our scoreboard, and a scoreboard, well, I'm just going to return the score. So of course we are going to have passed through a score into here. So we can, I'm just going to destructure something that we put in here for now. However, we are not importing this, so it won't matter. And then, and let's also style it up later. For now, we do have a scoreboard, but first let's go back in here, and before using that, what we have made using component, we need to actually figure out the logic of how we are going to store our scores. Of course, we get the score when we make a row of 3 or 4 or a column of 3 or 4. So in here, right before we return out of this, well, we're gonna have to set the score. So once again, up here, I'm going to say const, and then I'm going to say score. Let's call this code display, just to be really clear about what this is, because it's the final score that we're going to display in the score display. I'm going to call this set score display and use set, use state start off at 0, because initially it will be 0. So here right after we get match, I am just also going to set the score display, but we can't just set another number. We need to get whatever the score display is and add a score on top of it. So we can do so with the callback function, just like so. So whatever the score is, I am going to get the score add, and now 4 to, I'm whatever the score is, I'm going to add 4 to it, because we are getting a column of 4. Okay, so that is good. And then for now, I'm actually just going to console log out this code. So it will be whatever the score displays. So console's log score display, like so. I'm going to get rid of the another console logs in here, just so we can really see what is happening. We don't need the e in here, we don't need this anymore. So we are console logging out the score display. Let's see, inspect, let's see happening now in our console log. So okay, that is printing out each time, and we have just got a match of 4 score. It is looking good. If we get a match of 3, so okay, it's adding, and so that's looking good, and we have made 2 more matches along the way. Great. So now if I want to display the score, well, I would simply just pass through the score display into our scoreboard. So we have exported the scoreboard. Let's go ahead and import it here. So I'm going to import it up clearly, actually import scoreboard from, and then we get the path of where to store. It will store in and components forward slash core board, so that it's look good. You can just observe, of course, call this whatever we want as it, an export default, meaning they will export whatever this is, no matter what is this called. Don't forget to put a dot, and I'm going to get my scoreboard. I'm going to put it down here outside of the game, and then pass through the score as the score display. So passing through score display as the score, just like so. Let's have a look here, and great. So now let's make another row of 4, or try to make another row of 4. Remove that, it should be row 4. You will see our score does increase So we are adding the score here. We are getting the score of 4, and then also we need to add 4 here. We need to add 3 here and another 3 as well. The other thing we need to do is because this score is very high, it seems we are counting that if there is a row of 3 blank, that that is also adding to the score. We don't want that this blank as a does, so not count this blank. So let's go back in here and let's define what a blank is each time. We check for matches. So once again up here we are checking for column of 4. Let's define is blank, and is blank essentially means the current color arrangement array. And so whatever item is in the current color arrangement we are looking through, if that equals blank, well then no, it's blank, and we don't want this to be a match. So whatever square we equals the decided color and is not so blank, is not blank, then we can add the score. Okay, so just make sure to add this, otherwise every time there is 3 blanks or 4 blank, it will be added to this and it will add it to this score, and we don't want that. So whether we go and it's not blank and it's not blank, and also let's define what blank is in each of this. So that should be better, making sure this is and it's not blank, it's not blank. Great, so show me more realistic. So this is should be more realistic in terms of score, and wonderful. Okay, so this should have the 3. Great, and 3 should just add another 3, and now some more matches happen. Let's try another one and should hopefully just add 3. Okay, great, so it is it, I mean, please feel free to take this game. Like I said, definitely could do with some refactoring. I'm just going to clean it up for you a bit while I am here. Just going to use webstorm for to this format for me, so there will go much neater look. And then of course we want to start adding more components, and moment we have one scoreboard right here, and it is very simple. It's a score component. We will show how to, please feel free to show some. If you just want to refactor it and design it yourself, you can refactor it yourself, doesn't need to do anything. If you want to style it, if anything, and I will share you the file with this, and hope you enjoy it and you learned a lot. And I will just explain it for you once, that because I will give a brief demonstration. And firstly, we are just taking the code editor of your own choice. We are initializing the projects using the command of npx create react app or npm create react. Anything a command you can choose. Further, there might be some update to create this, and also you can just change the react script from the package JSON, or you can just directly run npm start to start the server. For now not dependency is being installed, so you can just get to go with this, and you can just delete the unnecessary files. That is a very basic simple step. Because why I always suggest this to delete unnecessary files, because it will create a more burden for you to choose the right component or to make the project properly, isn't it? So like that, always suggest you to create a neat and clean project, obviously. And you should have a one app.js and index file, and then it should create furtherwise. And you can delete the index or keep the index, but I would suggest you to go along with the project. It will help you more if you just go along with this. Now after just completing everything, go along with the project with the logics and necessary things. You can download the code in the last lecture video. I will give the whole project code over there. You can just go through it. If you are facing problem with the video tutorial, you can just go through the code. You can, it is very easy to understand. If you have the basic knowledge of react.js, you can just go through it and get the knowledge what you are trying to say, what are actually getting to getting into your mind. And you can, after that, if you understand the logic, you are good to go. Else you can watch the video, and we have just given everything step by step. And you can just share, do one thing, that is, I will suggest, if you have two devices, you can just open the code file in your device or computer, and you can open your user mobile or tablet to see the lecture, and you can just compare it, so that in what step we are going to do what. Or you can just simply do it as watching the video lecture. That will be a great possibility to understand and just learn properly. And using hooks was a very major vital thing, and the logical part of drag and drop was also a very logical thing. I hope you got this too. If you haven't got, just practice it 2 to 3 times, you will obviously get. If you haven't have the knowledge of the function of arrow functions, you can check over for the tutorials over there in the internet. It is freely available in W3 schools and everywhere for tutorials point everywhere. And the React basic organization website, that is react.org, there are also many tutorials available, that is how each components work. So I hope you have enjoyed the video and you have learned anything we could do, and you can just extremely do anything to improve yourself. So I would like to thank to stay with us, and good luck.